everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're covering Season 5 of the anime Bleach.
Both continuing and concluding the Bount Arc from Season 4. The Bounts have reached the Soul Society with the goal of wiping out all the Soul Reapers who inhabit it. So, it's up to Ichigo and his friends to stop them from committing mass genocide.
That's pretty much what it is.
And it got pretty dark.
Yep. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, and notification bell to get updates on future podcasts and roll to pause videos.
And more Bleach podcasts.
Of course, yes. You know you love that, Phoenix. So, on our last one for Season 4, we found out shortly before recording that the Bount Arc is not canon in the manga. It's anime only to spread out the time between chapters to adapt. But we also found out that it is the least liked arcs of the Bleach series, calling it just a waste of time because it goes on for way too long. Now, we do feel that it went on a little long because there were times we felt like, okay, they need to stop, they need to really get them. They do! It's just, I guess it can feel a little long, but I wouldn't say this was the worst.
Definitely not.
There was still action, there was still story. Yeah, it dragged a little bit, but it didn't feel like it was going to go on forever. You were just going to be glad when these Bounts were gone for good because of how much they were a threat and kind of hypocritical they were.
Right. I do like that you got more backstory on the leader. You got a lot more backstory, and you found out how he was prior to him, how he was as a child, and how he was prior to his transformation, which we won't spoil how that happens, and how his attitude changed. And you find out that the Reaper who created them actually saved his life, and he didn't care. He was such an AWS that he wanted to kill her anyway.
You're right.
So that was, to me, that was really interesting that they took it here.
Right.
It was a twist we didn't see coming.
Right.
And you saw also more about her backstory and how she truly cared for the Bounts, and
right.
she wanted to save them all.
Right.
And she thought killing them was horrible, and she did everything that was in her power to protect them. And unfortunately, for the vast majority of them, it was not enough.
Right, and it leads to why they were so intent on just wiping out the Soul Reapers and Soul Society. They thought this was going to solve everything, and then as it goes on, it turns out, you know, this wasn't really as kind of sort of admirable to them as it thought it was. It thought, oh, he's fighting for us and our right to live and so forth. And he's like, yeah, screw you, I'm just in it for myself.
Yeah.
And they were like, what the heck? They were furious that he had done all this. A lot of them were already taken out because they can't regenerate or have others like them, so they're the only ones of their kind. And this is what he does. Doesn't care if they get wiped out. He can be the last one as long as he gets what he wants. And that's when pretty much the last of them kind of just turned on him because he lied to them all that time.
And rightly so. Unfortunately, it was too late when they decided to turn because he'd already gotten what he wanted.
Right.
He'd already pretty much resulted in them being destroyed. And at that point, it didn't matter anymore.
Yeah. And they also had some little arcs in here that were self-contained, just like with the Bount Arc itself.
And I will say, for that, there were just too many of them.
Yes.
There were too many of them. Every time you thought you were getting to the truth of one, another one popped up, and then another one popped up,
yeah,
and then another one popped up, and there were just too many going at one time. It wasn't that you couldn't keep up with them. It just seemed like it was too crowded in this room, and
right.
Some of you people need to leave.
Right. It was so many arcs going at the same time. Every episode, every character had some arc. Whether it was the good guys, the bad guys, the Reapers, the Bounts, the Ichigo, everyone has some type of weird arc going on. And the biggest one had to be Uryu, who temporarily got his Quincy powers back. Right. And I say temporarily because clearly he's not supposed to keep them, so they came up with a sort of he temporarily gets some powers to help defeat them, and then they're gone again, so it can still keep in line with the manga. And the problem with these arcs is that they don't grow from it. Nothing changes because it can't interfere with the other story, so you're left with these two arcs where no one gets any character development. They just sort of just have to get them out, that's it for 2 seasons straight. So that's probably another reason why it's not really popular, because you don't get too much else out of it in terms of the enjoyment other than seeing an extra story that wasn't in the manga. No one is different from when they started. They just gotta fight. It's over, and then they go back home.
Right. And you see a lot of appearances again. There's too many characters.
It's like 15. There's like 15 by the time you finish counting up everybody to fight the bounts. It's like 15 or more to keep track of every episode.
Plus all the others that we don't mention that pop out here and there.
Mm-hmm.
You do find out. And again, as you mentioned, some of these stories are now not canon. Like, you had a couple on some of the Soul Reapers that don't matter because they're not canon.
Mm-hmm.
You had some actions that took place in terms of what happened with the Soul Society itself, and it doesn't matter because it's going to be like it never happened when you get to season 6. Ichigo, as you mentioned, has no growth here. You see him being strong, but there's no growth, there's no training, there's nothing but him trying to rescue people, which is fine because, you know, he was being his true self, I should say. But for me, I love seeing him get stronger and stronger and better as a character, and I miss that here. It was great seeing him, but what I've come to love about his character just didn't happen in this season.
Yeah. And, you know, there was still, like, it was probably enough comedy, but they didn't really have, like, standalone comedy episodes other than one. Because when the Bounts got started on their stuff from season 4 and 5, it stayed serious. The only time you had any levity was when you had the little Guide to Soul Reaper's golden thing at the end. With,
golden.
Yeah, golden. You got that at the end. And maybe 1 or 2 instances of the goofy music playing with 2 of them arguing about something that made no sense for them to argue over, and that was it. Besides that, the main mission was to get rid of them before they took everyone out.
Right. Now, another thing that I think is unfortunate is in this particular season, they really focused on you're seeing the strength of Orihime and how in this season she grew and got so powerful she was able to save Rukia, but it never will count because it's not canon.
Exactly. So it'll be like the development never happened.
Her being powerful in here and not abandoning Rukia, and no matter what she said, she wouldn't leave her because that's just Orihime, and it was wonderful. And Rukia being impressed with her loyalty and her strength, and again, none of it matters because it's not canon. So
exactly, it's like nothing happened.
It's just, how could you waste this that would help to dissuade some of the people who speak illy of her character? It would have been great for this to be canon,
right?
And it's not.
And that's another thing. All the fights and things, while when the action gets going, it's very interesting seeing their power tier levels. Part of them go on way too long. An entire episode dedicated to one fight scene. By the time you think it's finally turning a tail, to be continued, like 20 minutes of talking, standing, and then fighting. It's like, wow. It can be like 3 episodes before they finally take out a bout and then move on to the next one. That's part of why the season is so long. And by the time you get to near the end, or you have some of these bounts gone, you're almost done with the season. And most of it has been dedicated to fighting or talking while they're fighting, which is only a little pet peeve of mine because they do it so much here with the Western cartoons where they don't want to show action. They want to show you the people talking to each other as they're doing still frames and stuff, and not show you any darn fighting. It's just like, oh, so and so and so, oh, and so and this and that. Like, are you gonna fight? Or are you gonna have a debate?
I'm gonna go back to Rukia, and that's another place here to me they failed. Because we see Rukia being so weak she can't do anything.
It was strange.
Exactly. It just was out of character. And lastly for me on the things that I'm picking out, you saw something that was really, you saw this strange, I don't want to ruin it for you guys, you saw this strange, it was supposed to be a myth but ends up being true, and it involves all this destruction and things being placed and solving riddles. It was like, this is not National Treasure. It was out of place.
Right. They started
out of place.
They started incorporating more Western movies into the stories. Like last season they started copying some movies that came out at the time and made that the story, like being led to different clues through phone calls from payphones. Then here, find this clue to lead to that, and find to this. It's like, why are you suddenly becoming other movies? It doesn't fit with Bleach. Isn't you got enough movies that do that now and adapt things that don't fit? It's one thing if you do stuff that has a similar thing to Bleach, like if it has to do with this fantasy or the supernatural or something, and incorporate that into it. It's fine because it's part of the theme. And we've been reading things recently, they're older books, and suddenly whatever was out at the time, they suddenly threw it in there, and it's like, but that's not what this story's about, and it feels off. I mean, it's not like you don't enjoy it, but it feels off when you watch it because it's like you're almost watching something else or a crossover of something else.
Okay, I found one more thing. In this season, Yoriichi and her lieutenant,
yeah,
they come to an agreement. But it doesn't matter because it's not canon. So we get to season 6. They're going to be back at odds again. It's
right.
Like, why would you do that here and give us false hope?
Exactly. Any sort of hope or positivity you have for some of these characters are going to have to be retcon and go back to being how they were before until whatever actually happens in the manga that's canon comes about. Right. Which they make jokes about within the show. Like, hey, it's my episode, so we're going to do this. Is this canon? Yes! They do stuff like that, but it's hard to get into some of these because now you gotta know, unless you read the manga or look it up, you don't know what's canon and you don't know what is. Sometimes you can tell with their themes. It's like, yeah, you can tell this is something they threw in, but other times, sometimes it can be so good it won't feel like filler. But in this case, for the Bount Arc, it just didn't really fit with Bleach. Not because it wasn't enjoyable, but because it felt so out of place with them dealing with immortal vampires who weren't really vampires. And this became this whole thing of saving the Soul Society when they already had to escape from it. They go back home. Right. 2 episodes later, they go back, and it's like, and then they want to get rid of him. It's like, I couldn't help it. They're about to destroy everything. So hopefully, in the next season, they can just stay on Earth and not go back to the Soul Society for another 5 seasons. Because if so, it's like, why don't you go get an apartment there and just like make that your second home? Because you keep going back.
I'm glad you said that because it was entertaining. It may not be canon, there may have been some things that we didn't care for, but it was entertaining. It was not boring. As you said, the fights sometimes were a little too long and the incessant talking and things, but it was entertaining. The only drawback, as you did mention, is that it's not canon.
Right.
But it was definitely entertaining, and there were some great backstories that aren't canon. There's some action scenes that were actually quite good. There were some twists and turns you didn't see coming. The last thing I want to say is how it ended. It was kind of like, what?
It was sort of unusual for Bleach. It felt too calm.
It felt to me like a letdown.
Yeah, like, oh, it's over. Now we go back home. It was like, you kind of let that go too softly. Which brings us to the final thing I will bring up is that they bring up twice with Ichigo nearly going psycho. And it's supposed to be this thing that they already had before they had the filler, was that after he became a Reaper, some type of power is laying in him that keeps coming out every time he's on the brink of death.
Tell us in the comments, Phoenix. We know you know.
Right.
Where he has the death mask on one side.
Yeah. And it comes out when he's on the brink and they're beating him so badly. He's like near unconscious and he comes out with that and he's like he's possessed and he goes fighting crazy and trying to kill his opponent, and Ichigo has to take over again and take it off before it comes over, but both times it started getting stronger and lasting longer, which doesn't matter because it's probably going to be stronger in the same way because this isn't canon. But this was still interesting to see that this was already in place for the story, so at least we know this is going to come up and be canon later on.
Definitely. So, if you've seen Bleach Season 5, let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you really dislike it like a lot of people do? Or like us, you found it entertaining? Yeah, it was lacking, but, you know, overall, it was an entertaining watch, and we can't wait to get to Season 6. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
And be sure to like, subscribe, and notification bell to get updates of future podcasts and multiple pause videos.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Rascal Entertainment.
And I'm Mom Entertainment.
Have a fantastic day.
Peace.
Flashing lights, trying to walk around, man, who the hell are you? What you wanna do? My man, it's on you. Man, it's on you. With her in my dreams, she was my queen. I catch a filling the mountaintops, rivers and streams. Plucking sunlight from the sky in my pocket, give it to you later on in the form of a locket.